My family betrayed me and kept a secret from me for 14 years. I was engaged to a beautiful woman back in 2010. I was 22 years old and she was 20. We had dated for about 2 years, and I was finally introducing her to my family. We had just gotten engaged and were planning a wedding in the upcoming June or July. My fiancée was staying at my parents' house because she couldn't fly home, so she ended up just moving into the house and staying in my sister's room. I was living at my parents' house at the time. All of a sudden, she became really upset with me, to the point that she was hitting me. I kept asking her what the hell was wrong, and she would just leave for a few days at a time. She would leave, come back, leave, come back. I honestly thought she had lost her mind, and for the past 14 years of thinking back on it, I have never been able to figure out how our relationship went from being perfect and incredible to her being extremely pissed off at me all the time. The spring of 2011 came around, and she was still behaving this way, angry, violent, and crying all the time. I thought she had a mental disorder and pressured her to tell me why she was acting this way. She refused to tell me, and I suggested she get therapy. This made her even angrier, so I broke off the engagement and we went our separate ways. Today, 2024, I went to see my parents. My mom told me she had a confession to make. She told me that she and my dad had told my fiancé that I was cheating on her because they felt I wasn't ready for a commitment like that, and because my brother couldn't find love, so it was unfair for me to be in a relationship. It's been 14 years, and I have never actually dated or fallen in love again. I have had some physical relationships, but they never turned into anything. For 14 years, I have remained single, and not by choice. It's just that I can't fall in love. I'm so angry after finding out that my parents poisoned my fiancé against me. Now all of these problems make sense, and now I understand what happened. But it was 14 years ago, and there is literally nothing I can do about it. Edit. I just remembered something my mom said about a month ago. She said, "When are you gonna have kids? You're almost 40, and I'm getting close to being too old to be a grandmother." You people think I'm kidding. This is why mental abuse goes under the radar. Nobody believes it. Am I wrong? I possibly ruined a student's life. I, 29-year-old male, am a high school history teacher and might have unintentionally ruined a student's life. Here's what happened. Despite being 29, I look much younger. When I started at this school, many teachers mistook me for a student. This still happens occasionally with new teachers. Over the years, I've had female students develop crushes on me, which for some reason only intensified after they learned I'm gay. I tried to ignore it as it was mostly harmless. This year, however, a student, let's call her Katie, has made me extremely uncomfortable. It starts with her asking personal questions like, "Are you married?" and "How old were you when you lost your virginity?" This last one was during a sex ed class I was subbing for. She also brought me gifts and flirted openly in class, which I tried to ignore. Things worsened when Katie became very rude to my boyfriend, Blake, who is also a teacher at the school. She was disruptive, made sarcastic comments, and openly challenged his authority. When Blake and I got engaged, her behavior escalated, leading to multiple visits to the principal. Katie began showing up everywhere. I went outside school, grocery store, dog park, mall, gym, theater, and even at restaurants with Blake. It was unsettling. After Blake and I married, we learned that a girl matching Katie's description tried to crash our wedding, but was turned away. This deepened my concerns about her behavior. The breaking point was finding a notebook with disturbing content left on a table. It belonged to Katie and contained explicit stories about me and her, including scenarios where my husband dies in horrific ways. I took the notebook to the principal and detailed everything that had happened. Katie's parents were called, and she was removed from my class and assigned to only female teachers. I asked for no expulsion or charges. I just wanted her to get help, which her parents agreed to, and she was being put in therapy. However, we live in a small town and word spread. Katie developed a reputation as a stalker and weirdo among students. She is facing severe bullying, both online and offline. It had got to the point her parents had to withdraw her from school because she was jumped by a group of girls. To make matters worse, we have a student with a decent following on TikTok, and she posted about the situation, leading to even more online harassment toward Katie. Katie eventually had to delete all her social media accounts. I feel terrible. I never intended for all this to happen. Edited. For those wonder how it got leaked, it was likely leaked by 2 female teachers known for bad-mouthing students behind their backs. These 2 are honestly no better than the students and swear never grew out of their mean girl phase. It is horrible, but since there is no concrete proof they are doing it, nothing can be done about it. Am I wrong for canceling a trip for being harassed by someone in the group? Months later, I'm being threatened to pay a share of the Airbnb. Earlier in the year, a friend, or ex-friend now, wanted to go on a group trip with a shared Airbnb. A few people said they wanted to come but didn't follow through with booking. In the end, 3 people were going, and one guy booked an Airbnb with 3 double beds for 6 people with cancellation up to a certain date, about a week in advance, I think. Then I booked my flight. This was in early March, and the trip was early April. All was well until one evening when my friend asked me to take a picture of him the next morning for his agency for a big modeling job. After a bit of back and forth, I told him no because I keep being asked to do unpaid work. I compromised to do it in the afternoon when I left for work. The next morning, he texted me that he was really pissed off about that, and I didn't respond, thinking he'd just shrug it off because it's frankly no big deal to refuse unpaid work. A few days later, I entered an event run by one of my clients. As I walked in, he called out, "F off, get the F out of here, you're in trouble," in front of everyone in the smoking area, which was humiliating. Everybody pretty much brushed this off as him being cocky. I went back to find him, and he was angrily explaining to someone how I didn't get the headshot for him despite all that he'd done for me, and didn't really let me get a word in on the matter before walking off and eventually leaving. I told someone that I was going on this trip in a couple of weeks, but that we'd obviously had a falling out. He said that's the sort of thing you need to get figured out before you go, which is right. So, the next day I tried to call him. No answer. I asked when a good time was to call, and he said, "Maybe tomorrow." The next day I called him. No answer. I tried again. No answer. He texted asking me what I'm expecting to do. I said, "Let's not take this to the trip with us," and his response was, "Lol, wow, I'm taking this with us." A bit of back and forth went nowhere. I discussed it with other people who said he was being ridiculous. Additionally, nothing was being planned for the second week of the trip, and he kept saying he might be getting work and might cut the trip short. I decided to tell them in the group chat that I was canceling my flights at a cost of $200 a few days prior to the Airbnb cancellation date, then left the chat. He didn't reach out. The guy who booked the Airbnb didn't reach out. Only one person reached out to ask what was up, as if she didn't already know, but didn't mention anything about the Airbnb costs. I left it a few more days, then canceled my flights. Absolutely no correspondence from anybody about the trip. They went on the trip. Everybody asked me what had happened, and everybody sided with me on it. You can't get angry because someone won't do unpaid work for you. A month later, they returned. I thought the trip would have lightened him up and he would come back with an apology. Nope, he still had it in him. We didn't interact, but a whole bunch of people tried talking to him, convincing him he was being ridiculous. This has been going on since early May. It's this constant, "Have you made up with him?" over and over. Every now and then he'll mention that I still owe the guy for booking the Airbnb. It's now late July. We've had brief chats which have gone nowhere. He's gone from asking me to apologize to now asking me to pay for the Airbnb. Sometimes I'll walk into the bar we frequent and he'll say F off under his breath. He's also approached people I'm talking to and said, "No, don't talk to this guy, we don't like him." Now the guy who booked it is in my Instagram DM saying, "Would appreciate it if you could pay." I told him I could call him the next day to discuss it, and he said, "No need to call, here are my bank details." I didn't respond because it was 9 p.m. and I'm not just going to send money without debating it. A couple of days later, "Please pay for this. If we meet again at the bar, it'll get hostile. Pay for it and let's move on." Personally, I think I did my bit by trying to sort things out before the trip, and I think I gave ample opportunity to reorganize things. I think they should have come to me before the trip to sort this out, not 4 months later. I take the "it'll get hostile" as a threat, and I don't think bar security would take that lightly, and they very happily ban people who cause problems. He keeps texting me, and I haven't responded because I'm not sure what to say, and he's being really forceful as opposed to debating it. Am I wrong for causing my son to pull out of my daughter's wedding after I told him what she said? I, 57-year-old female, told my daughter, 24-year-old female, that I would not be attending her wedding due to her fiancé's 29-year-old female past. My extended family has now turned on me. Advice on how to handle them? Hello, I made a previous post on this somewhere else. I think you should be able to see it. I'm new to Reddit, but I've looked around for the past few weeks. My daughter is marrying Connor at the end of August. Connor has a not-so-great history that I went into on my previous post. 2 days ago, I told my daughter that I would not be attending her wedding because of this history, but I still always be there for her. I wasn't a large part of the wedding party other than being family, and I'm not removing any financial aid I've already given or promised them. I genuinely only ever want my daughter and son to be happy, but I cannot go to this wedding. I raised them to accept everyone and to love anyone they liked. I am aware that I am going against my own teachings, but, as previously stated, I cannot go. My extended family does not know of Connor's history. I didn't until my son informed me roughly 2 weeks ago. My daughter was naturally upset at my refusal to go to her wedding, and I do not in any way blame her for telling them that I was refusing to attend. I do wish she had said why or given a more detailed explanation as to why I wasn't. I am now being flooded with calls and messages from my extended family, all calling me awful names. According to them, I'm an awful mother, I failed, and I should never have been allowed to have children. A particularly spiteful message from my cousin told me she was glad my eldest daughter passed away when she was 12, as I couldn't ruin her wedding. That was 15 years ago now, but I cried reading that message. What I'm asking about is this. I want to tell them why I'm not going to my daughter's wedding, but I also feel it is not my place. Is there any middle ground here? How do I get them to back off? Did I make a mistake saying I wouldn't go to the wedding? Update. After my latest post, I talked to my son and told him about these Reddit posts. George, my son, wanted to read them for himself before he developed an opinion. He said this was because he didn't want to agree and then see me lie in a post, which I completely understand. I handed over my phone and let him read. At first, George just sat there reading everything I had written. When he finished, he placed my phone down and asked me to repeat exactly what my daughter had said to me when I confronted her about her fiancé's past. This past landed him 3 years in prison and to be out of the offenders register when he was in his early 20s. To sum up what my daughter said, she didn't care. The girl was older enough to know better. It wasn't like that. And her fiancé was a stupid 20-something-year-old when it happened, and he shouldn't be judged for something that happened when he was so young. He was 21. My son got quiet and told me he needed to go. I assumed it was his prior engagements that he warned me about, so I didn't think anything of it. However, I later found out that after he left my house, he drove around to my daughter Maddie's house and yelled at her. I don't approve of this, but I have never been a confrontational person. George told Maddie that he would not be attending the wedding if she was going to brush aside the atrocity that her fiancé committed. I found out about this whole thing when Maddie called me. At first I was thrilled as she had not initiated contact since I told her I would not be attending the wedding. When I picked up my phone, however, she began screaming at me for telling George about her fiancé, that I was an awful mother and I never cared about her, that I was selfish and disgusting, and she hoped no one ever let me forget it. She ranted for what must have been half an hour before she stopped. I think I was in a daze. I didn't even notice when she hung up. I just stood there with a hung-up phone for what must have been at least 10 minutes. Several important pieces of information are as follows. George told me about Maddie's fiancé, not the other way around. 15 years ago, my eldest daughter, Sarah, passed away suddenly at 12 years of age. I genuinely only ever want my children to be happy, and I thought that meant regardless of who makes them happy. But this is pushing it. A non-violent criminal I could live with, a child offender, is an entirely separate matter. And finally, for the past few days I've been getting harassed by my extended family about not going to Maddie's wedding. I do not know what story she told them, but I was planning on asking my son if we should share the police report or similar on Maddie's fiancé with them. Am I wrong for telling my son the awful things my daughter said?